If you've ever noticed that life doesn't just hurt you once, but sometimes in ways that repeat, quietly, over and over again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in patterns you can't quite explain. Then you've already started to see something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Because the darker sides of life aren't always obvious. They don't always look like tragedy. Sometimes, they look like normal behavior, and that's what makes them dangerous. The first dark side of life is this: not everyone who smiles at you wants the best for you. You've probably felt this before. Someone supports you, but something feels slightly off. Their words sound right, but their energy doesn't fully match. And it's confusing because there's no clear evidence, nothing you can point to. But psychologically, humans are incredibly sensitive to subtle cues. Tone shifts, micro-expressions, inconsistencies. What's really happening here is that not all connection is genuine. Some people relate through comparison, not care. And when your growth reminds them of their own limitations, support quietly turns into discomfort. That doesn't make them evil. It just means that sometimes people don't root for you. They measure themselves against you. And that changes everything about how they show up. The second dark side: people don't always leave when you expect them to. They leave when it benefits them. You might think relationships end because of conflict, or distance, or incompatibility. But often, people stay through all of that until something shifts in their own life. Until they no longer need what you provided, emotionally, psychologically, or even practically. And that realization stings, because it challenges a comforting belief that loyalty is mutual. But in reality, human attachment is often tied to function, what you represent, how you make someone feel, and when that changes, their presence can change too. Not always out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. The third dark side: being the strong one often means no one checks on you, you handle things quietly. You don't break down in front of others, you listen more than you speak, and over time, people begin to assume something, that you're okay, not because they don't care, but because you've never shown them otherwise. Psychologically, people respond to visible signals. And when your pain is internal, it becomes invisible. So the very trait that helped you survive becomes the reason you go unnoticed. That's not strength in the way people think, that's adaptation. The fourth dark side: sometimes, closure doesn't come. No explanation. No apology. No clear ending. Just silence. And the mind hates that. Because psychologically, humans are wired to complete emotional loops. We want reasons. We want clarity. But life doesn't always provide that. And when it doesn't, your mind fills in the gaps, replaying conversations, rewriting scenarios. Trying to create meaning where none was given, not because you're weak, but because your brain is trying to protect you from uncertainty. Still, some things don't resolve. They just fade. And that's harder to accept than most people realize. And here's where it gets interesting. Because the fifth dark side isn't about other people, it's about you. Sometimes, you're not actually confused. You're avoiding the truth. You already sense when something feels wrong, when someone's behavior shifts, when your needs aren't being met. But acknowledging it would force a decision. And decisions come with loss. So instead, the mind delays clarity. It questions itself, overanalyzes, looks for alternative explanations, not because you don't see the reality, but because seeing it clearly would mean you can't stay the same. And that's where fear quietly takes control. Not fear of being wrong, but fear of what happens if you're right. The sixth dark side: people often treat you based on what you tolerate, not what you deserve. You can be kind, respectful, understanding, but if your boundaries are unclear, your treatment becomes inconsistent. Not because people consciously decide to disrespect you, but because human behavior adapts. It tests. It learns what is allowed. And over time, it adjusts accordingly. So what feels like unfairness often begins as unnoticed patterns. Patterns where you stay quiet, where you overlook things. Where you chose peace over honesty, And slowly, that becomes your role. Not because you chose it consciously, but because you repeated it enough for others to believe it. The seventh dark side. Outgrowing people is lonely, even when it's necessary. You start thinking differently, responding differently, needing different things. And suddenly, conversations feel shallow. Connections feel misalIgned. Not because anyone did something wrong, but because you're no longer the same person you were when those bonds formed. And that creates a quiet distance, one that isn't loud enough to confront, but strong enough to feel. So you find yourself in between, not fully connected to the past, not fully settled into what's next. And that space can feel isolating, even when it's part of growth. And the eighth dark side. Life doesn't always reward effort the way you expect. You can try hard, do the right things, stay consistent, and still not get the outcome you thought you would. Because effort and outcome aren't always directly connected, are variables you don't control. Timing, perception, circumstances, and that can feel unfair. Because we're taught to believe that effort guarantees results. But life is more complex than that. And realizing this doesn't make effort meaningless. It just removes the illusion of control, which, for many people, is uncomfortable to face. When you step back and really look at all of this, you start to notice something. None of these patterns are random. They're deeply human. They come from the way we protect ourselves. The way we attach, the way we avoid pain, even when it creates more of it. And once you see these darker sides clearly, you don't necessarily become cynical. You become aware. You start noticing the patterns instead of getting lost inside them. And that awareness quietly changes how you move through life. Because it was never just bad luck. It was never just how things are. It was a pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. If this explains something you've been feeling but couldn't quite put into words, then you're already looking deeper than most people ever do, and there's always more to uncover.